Syria didn't just burn, it breathed war into every breath you took. The city was a carcass of collapsed buildings, torn flags, and shattered prayers. Smoke slithered through the cracks of concrete like a living thing. Bullets sang across rooftops in staccato rhythm. Every step was a gamble with fate. Captain Lyra Quinn had trained her whole life for moments like this, but no amount of training could prepare her for what was coming. Her voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Bravo 1, move left, clear the alley. 2 minutes to exfil, the boy 8, maybe 9, gripped her gloved hand with everything he had left. His eyes didn't cry. They had already run out of tears. Behind him, his grandmother stumbled over debris. Lyra's team closed in around them, shielding both civilians from the sniper threat they couldn't see, only feel. Suddenly buzz, not from the drone overhead, from her sat phone buried beneath Kevlar and grit. She glanced down. Not now. Not during an extraction. Not with lives on the line. Not with enemy fire 2 streets over. Her finger hovered. She hesitated. Then a flicker inside her. Something ancient. Something sacred. A mother's instinct. She tapped the receiver to her ear, still crouched behind the rusted shell of an old truck. The sat phone crackled. Then a voice. Breathy. Urgent. Not military. Civilian. Mrs. Quinn. This is St. Francis Children's Hospital. The world around her didn't freeze, but her heart did. Your daughter is in critical condition. There are things your brain refuses to hear in the right order. Her mind scrambled. Daughter, critical, hospital. Time stretched like melted glass. Her throat tightened. What happened, she asked, barely recognizing her own voice. The nurse sounded shaken. She was brought in by your husband's new wife. Said she fell. But the injuries, they don't align. I've seen falls. This isn't one. A pause. Paper rustled on the other end. Machines beeped in the background, fast, erratic. Then came the words that rewired everything inside her. The detective on the case isn't moving. Her brother is the police chief. Boom. Not a mortar. But something inside her shattered. This wasn't war. This was worse, because it was home, and it was her daughter. Her grip on the boy's hand tightened. She turned toward her second-in-command and barked orders. Prep exfil. Take them to Gaziantep. You'll handle the handoff. Captain, that's against protocol. Protocol doesn't raise my kid. She handed him the sat phone, then ran. Not away from war, toward it. But this time the battlefield wasn't Syria. It was the United States of America. Lyra stood alone in the middle of the makeshift airstrip. The desert wind whipped across her face, hot and merciless. Her boots were coated in the blood-colored dust of Syria. Behind her, the last of the civilians were being loaded into the trucks. But her mind was 6,000 miles away. She could still hear the nurse's voice, still feel the static of that terrible call against her ear. The detective isn't moving on it. Her brother is the police chief. Her second-in-command approached. Lieutenant Myers, loyal, sharp, trained to follow protocol. He didn't speak at first, just stood beside her, watching her chest rise and fall like she was preparing for a different kind of war. Captain, he finally said, if you leave now, it's desertion under combat conditions. She nodded once eyes locked on the horizon. Then log it, she replied. Log it. Court-martial me later. Myers didn't argue, because something in her voice told him this wasn't a choice. This was survival, just not hers. Gaziantep, he asked. Yes. Secure the convoy. Get the boy and the grandmother out. Deliver the sat phone to the liaison. Tell them I'll finish the report from stateside. She handed him a sealed folder, one she never thought she'd have to use. Inside coordinates, clearance codes, contact sheets. And Myers, ma'am, you owe me nothing. But if anything happens to that child, make it matter. He nodded. Always, Captain. Then she turned and ran. Not from gunfire, not from enemies, but toward a truth no one else seemed willing to touch. The pilot was waiting, didn't ask questions, just looked at her, then at the map in her hand. You're not supposed to be here, he said. Neither are they. Lyra answered. The engine roared to life, 30 minutes until wheels up. But she wasn't going to wait that long. She climbed into the bird, head down, helmet off. The kind of silence inside her now wasn't military. It was maternal. As the helicopter lifted off, Lyra didn't look back, because behind her was protocol, and in front of her was her daughter's life. The doors of St. Francis Children's Hospital opened with a cold hiss. Lyra stepped into fluorescent white corridors that smelled of antiseptic and fear. She didn't speak, didn't cry, didn't blink. Her jaw was clenched tight, her hands steady but too steady. The kind of stillness that happens right before a storm breaks. A nurse waited at the end of the hallway, mid-40s, eyes haunted, clipboard pressed tightly to her chest. No smile, no greeting. Just a whisper. She's stable for now, but you need to see this yourself. Room 214. The door creaked open. Lyra walked in and her heart nearly stopped. There beneath hospital lights too bright for such a small face lay her daughter, pale, motionless, breathing, but barely. Wires crisscrossed her tiny arms. Monitors blinked like warning signs. An IV line fed into her hand. Her favorite stuffed bunny lay folded at the edge of the bed, stained and forgotten. Lyra's breath caught. What? What happened to her? The nurse didn't answer with words. Instead, she pulled the blanket back slowly. And Lyra froze. Dark bruises painted her daughter's ribs. Small oval-shaped bruises ringed her wrists, finger marks. Too small to be an adult man's. Too cruel to come from someone who claimed to care. The room blurred, not from tears, but from the heat that suddenly roared through her chest. This wasn't a fall, it was a cover-up. She said the girl fell off a bunk bed, the nurse whispered, but I've worked trauma for 12 years. These injuries, they don't line up. Lyra looked at her daughter again, so still, so silent, and in that silence something shattered inside her. Why didn't the police investigate? The nurse's eyes dropped. Because the woman who brought her and her brother is the police chief. Boom. Again. Not outside, inside. She's your husband's new wife, right? Lyra nodded slowly. And he said it was just a domestic accident. That's what she told the intake team. But I didn't buy it, so I called a detective I trusted, and he told me to drop it. Just like that. Said it was being handled internally. The nurse's voice was shaking now, but I couldn't ignore it. So I started documenting everything. She stepped aside and opened a locked drawer. Inside was a sealed evidence bag. The clothes her daughter arrived in, still damp, stained, smelling of something no child should ever carry on their skin. Lyra's knees buckled. She gripped the metal railing of the bed just to stay upright, and then the nurse leaned in. I recorded the call with the detective when he told me to shut it down. Lyra turned sharply. You what I knew you'd need proof. I didn't know who else would fight for her. That's when the door opened. No knock, no warning, just perfume and poison. She walked in, immaculate makeup, heels clicking like a ticking clock. Lyra's husband's new wife, her voice sweet and slow like syrup over a razor blade. You're here, she said. Good. We should talk before you do something rash. Lyra stood shoulders squared, spine steel. Her next words came out like ice. We'll talk after I make 3 calls. And in that moment, the line between war zone and hospital, between soldier and mother, disappeared completely. There's a rule in combat. You don't leave your team. You don't abandon an extraction. You don't break protocol. But Lyra Quinn broke all 3 because her daughter's life wasn't something she could outsource. Because protocol doesn't raise your kid. The final civilian transport rumbled through the last checkpoint. The boy waved to her from the back seat of the armored truck, bandaged but alive. His grandmother placed a hand on her heart and mouthed, thank you. Lyra didn't wave back. She just nodded, eyes sharp, soul already halfway across the world. Her second in command, Myers, jogged up beside her, helmet in hand. Convoy's secure, he said. We've got 12 minutes until Bird's ready for extraction. She looked out over the desert. I won't be on it. His mouth opened, then closed. I figured. Lyra pulled a small folder from the inside of her vest, thick, creased, weathered. Inside, names, codes, private clearance she was never meant to use outside a war zone. She handed it to him. You'll get them across. Then deliver this to Colonel Shaw in Ankara. He'll know what to do. Myers stared at the folder, then at her. This isn't just about your kid, is it? Lyra didn't answer immediately. She watched the horizon instead. A line of heat mirage blurred the sand, just like the line between who she used to be and who she was about to become. No, she said finally. It's about every child who ever had their truth buried by someone in uniform. He exhaled slowly. Be safe, Captain. Don't call me that, she replied, already walking. Call me Mother. And with that, Lyra turned her back on the war she'd trained for and walked into the one no one had trained her for. Altitude 37,000 feet. Time 2:47 a.m. Destination home. But Lyra Quinn wasn't flying home. She was flying toward a war they thought she'd never fight. Her head rested against the cabin window of the military aircraft. The glass vibrated under her skull, but she didn't feel it. Her body was here, but her mind was on fire. Every minute she sat in that seat, fury crawled higher up her spine. Not the explosive kind, not the chaos of battlefield anger. No, this was colder, sharper, surgical. She opened her field notebook. A blank page stared back. She clicked her pen and wrote 3 names. 1, Detective Mark Hanley, the man who ignored the call. 2, Chief Raymond Selleck, the brother who silenced the case. 3, Sabrina Keller, her husband's new wife, the one who brought her daughter to the ER with lies in her mouth and bruises on her body. She circled the names, once, then again, and again, until the paper dented beneath the ink. Lyra wasn't naive. She knew how systems work. They protect their own. They pretend to investigate delay reports, manipulate evidence until the story dies. But this time, she was the story. She tapped her pen against the side of her boot. They wouldn't get a scandal. They would get a collapse. She pulled out a folded envelope, one she kept sealed for years. Inside a contact card, embossed. No name, just a number. The kind of number you only call when you're ready to break something from the inside. And she was ready. "You want to protect predators," she whispered to herself. "Then let me show you what a mother protects." The pilot's voice crackled through the intercom. "ETA 4 hours. Weather's clear." "You okay back there, Captain?" She stared straight ahead, eyes dry, jaw set. "I'm not the captain anymore." She turned the card over in her hand. "In the reckoning." The wheels hit the tarmac with a hollow thud, but to Lyra it sounded like a war drum. She didn't wait for the crew, didn't ask for permission. Boots hit the ground before the stairs locked into place. She stepped out into thick, humid air, the kind that wrapped around your throat and whispered, "You're not done yet." Lyra didn't bring a suitcase, didn't bring medals, didn't bring excuses. She brought one backpack, and inside it, documents, photos, evidence, names. Names of those who thought they'd buried the truth so deep no one would ever dig it back up. But she would. She already had the shovel. A black SUV was waiting near the hangar. The driver didn't ask questions, didn't even speak English. Didn't need to. He took one look at her face and knew. No badge, no ID, just one sentence. "Take me to St. Francis Children's Hospital. Don't stop for anyone." The vehicle cut through the sleeping city like a blade. Traffic lights blinked yellow over empty intersections. Rain slicked the streets, turning reflections into ghosts. Lyra sat in the back seat, her reflection staring back at her through the glass. A face without makeup, without armor, without fear. This wasn't the face of a soldier anymore. It was the face of a mother who'd come to burn the silence to the ground. "They hurt her," she whispered, "and no one did a damn thing." She reached into her bag and pulled out the evidence bag, held it in her lap, stared at it. Still damp, still smelling of shame. Her knuckles whitened. Let's see how quiet they stay when the fire reaches their doorstep. As the hospital came into view, her pulse didn't rise. It lowered, like a sniper's breath. Calm, deadly, focused, because this wasn't revenge. This wasn't chaos. This was war. And this time, the battlefield was justice. The sliding doors opened with a hush that felt too gentle for what was coming. Lyra stepped into the pediatric ICU. Her boots made no sound on the waxed linoleum floor. She didn't blink. She didn't breathe. Room 214. The nurse opened the door slowly, like she was afraid it might break something invisible. Inside, time stopped, and so did Lyra. Her daughter lay in the center of the room, small, still, dwarfed by machines larger than her body. A tangle of tubes and wires ran from her arms, her chest, her face. One monitor blinked, another hissed. A third beeped every time her child managed to breathe. It sounded like struggle, not rhythm, not life, just effort. Her chest rose, then paused, then again, so shallow it made Lyra's lungs ache. She took a step closer and saw it, the bruises, pale purple and sickly green, stretched across her daughter's ribs, ringed around her wrists, trailing up her neck. Lyra didn't cry. She couldn't, because grief hadn't arrived yet. Only fire. "She's stable," the nurse whispered, voice barely audible over the machinery. But the scans, they show evidence of past trauma. Not just this time. Lyra stared, not at the machines, not at the wires, but at the girl underneath it all. Her girl, her baby. the one she read bedtime stories to. The one who used to draw cats with 6 legs because 4 wasn't enough. The silence cracked. Lyra reached out gently, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. It clung to her fingers with static, warm, soft, too quiet. "Mommy's here," she said, her voice barely a breath. Her daughter didn't respond, didn't stir, didn't flinch. But somewhere deep inside Lyra's chest, something moved. Something violent, something pure. She looked to the nurse. Who did this to her? The nurse didn't answer. She just slid a sealed evidence bag onto the counter, inside her daughter's clothes. Still damp, still marked, still screaming without a sound. Lyra stared at the bag, and her hands, for the first time since landing, began to shake. Bruises don't lie, they don't bargain. They don't cover for anyone. They don't change their story. But the system lies all the time. It smooths things over, calls abuse a misunderstanding, hides reports, protects power. Lyra stared at her daughter's arms, so small, so bruised. Each mark was a sentence the child never got to speak. Each fingerprint-shaped shadow screamed louder than any voice could. And yet no one listened. Except one, the nurse. She stepped forward, lips trembling, eyes locked on the sealed evidence bag between them. "I knew this wasn't right," she said softly, "and I knew no one was going to help her." She walked to a side cabinet, unlocked it with a small brass key she wore around her neck, and pulled out a second envelope. "I wasn't supposed to do this," she added. "But I recorded the phone call, the one with Detective Hanley." Lyra's jaw clenched. "You recorded it?" "Yes," the nurse said. "When I told him about the injuries, he asked who the suspect was. When I said it was Sabrina Keller, he went silent, then told me to stand down. Said it was being handled internally." She handed Lyra a USB drive. "I knew that meant no one would do anything." Lyra took it with trembling fingers. "Why did you help?" The nurse hesitated, then said, "Because no one helped me. When I was 8. Silence. No machines. No words. Just 2 women. One bleeding internally. One remembering her own scar. What they did to your daughter. They want it forgotten," the nurse continued. "But I documented everything, photos, timestamps, nurse reports. And I called someone who doesn't answer to the chief." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "Who?" The nurse slipped her a folded sticky note. 3 names, 3 numbers. "You'll need them," she said. "One is a lawyer, one is a journalist. And the last one, let's just say he's not in any directory." Lyra stared at the note, then back at her daughter. Still unconscious, still silent, but no longer defenseless. "You did the right thing," Lyra said. "I hope so," the nurse whispered, "because they're going to come for me when they find out." "Let them try," Lyra said, and this time her voice was full of teeth. The door opened, no knock, no courtesy, just presence. And perfume. That kind of perfume that tries too hard to say, "I'm in control." Lyra didn't turn. She didn't have to. She felt it. That chill in the air. The kind that doesn't come from air conditioning, but from something venomous in the room. Sabrina Keller, her husband's new wife. The woman who brought her daughter to the ER with bruises and lies. She stepped into the room like she owned it. Click, click, click. Her heels struck the tile like gunshots in a church. She looked at the machines, then at the little girl. A flicker of something, maybe guilt, maybe calculation, crossed her face. Then it was gone. She turned to Lyra and smiled. That slow, smug, sideways smile that drips syrup and poison in equal measure. "You're here," she said. "Good. We should talk before you do something you'll regret." Lyra didn't move. She stood by the bedside, her hand resting gently on her daughter's arm. Her voice came low, even, but not soft. "We'll talk after I make 3 calls." Sabrina's smile flickered just a twitch, and Lyra saw it. Saw the microsecond of fear beneath the gloss. The nervous dart of her eyes to the nurse, who stood straighter now, arms crossed, witness present. "You don't know what you're starting," Sabrina hissed. "This family, these people, you think you can just blow it all up." Lyra finally turned, and when she did, everything changed. Her stare wasn't anger, it wasn't rage, it was precision, measured, controlled, deadly. "No," Lyra said calmly, "I don't think I can blow it up. I know I will." Sabrina took half a step back. Her perfume couldn't cover the panic anymore. It hung in the air like cheap perfume on fire. Lyra leaned in just enough to whisper, "You touched my child, and I'm going to make sure the whole damn system feels it." Sabrina didn't reply. She didn't have words anymore, just silence and the sound of her heels retreating. Click, click, gone, but her scent lingered for exactly 4 seconds until it was overtaken by disinfectant and fury. The nurse handed Lyra a yellow slip of paper. 3 numbers, 3 names, she said. Allies. Lyra nodded, then looked back at her daughter. Still, silent, but not alone. Never alone again. The yellow slip of paper felt heavier than it should. 3 names, 3 numbers. But none were just contacts. They were weapons. And Lyra knew once she called there was no walking this back. She stared at the list. 1. Clara Rain's attorney, family law. Known for making judges sweat. 2. Dev Patel, investigative journalist. Fired once for exposing a senator. Never stopped. 3. Only labeled, don't store this name, just call when you're alone. She called Clara first. Voicemail. But Clara didn't waste time. 2 minutes later, Lyra's phone buzzed. Miss Keller. The voice was crisp-clipped and already annoyed. I saw the ER report. This isn't a custody case, this is warfare. And I'm your sword. Lyra blinked. She didn't expect compassion, she didn't need it. But damn, she could work with fire. Next, Dev. She hesitated before pressing dial. Journalists could burn as easily as they illuminate, but Dev picked up on the first ring. Are you the mother? Yes. Then I'm already writing. He didn't ask for proof, he already had it. The sheriff's call was leaked, the bruises too. They tried to scrub the footage sloppy, but I have the backup. Why are you helping me? Lyra asked. There was a pause. Then Dev said, because I've seen too many mothers lose, and I'm tired of watching the quiet ones get erased. The final number. No name, no emoji, no label. Lyra waited until night fell, until the hospital hallway grew quiet, machines murmuring like lullabies. She dialed. It didn't even ring. Just connected. Silence on the other end. Then say nothing. I know who you are, and I know who she is. Lyra gripped the phone tighter. Do you know what she did? I know what they're covering up. Check your inbox. In 6 minutes, you'll have their entire strategy. Who are you? Silence again. Then a whisper, a mother who lost. But not again, not this time. Click. 6 minutes later, her inbox dinged. 1 zip file, no subject, no sender. Inside, internal emails, video stills, legal drafts with names blacked out, and a line scrawled across the last page. They think you'll fight this like a mother, fight it like a ghost. Lyra sat back. The world had tried to erase her daughter. Now she had allies, some in law, some in truth, some in the shadows. The diner was nearly empty save for a flickering neon sign and the smell of burnt coffee. Dev sat in the corner, booth jacket, wrinkled eyes, heavy fingers, curled around a recorder that had seen too many stories never told. When Lyra walked in, he didn't greet her. He nodded. Like they'd already started. You think this started with your daughter? Dev said quietly as the coffee steamed between them. I started digging 10 years ago. Lyra's eyes narrowed. Then why didn't I hear from you 10 years ago? Dev exhaled. Because the last woman who tried to speak up was buried in a custody battle. And the one before her lost her job, her home, and nearly her life. This isn't just a bad stepmother, Lyra. It's a machine. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were names, documents, a child's drawing. One page had a school counselor's report with the word unfounded stamped in red. Another was a letter to CPS from a grandmother who was never called back. And then a photo, a little boy, with the same hollow expression Lyra saw in her daughter last week. This system, Dev said, it doesn't just fail kids. It protects monsters in the right zip codes. Why now? Lyra asked. Because now someone survived, and that someone called me. He leaned forward. You, Lyra, are the final puzzle piece, the mother they didn't erase. And if you walk into that courtroom with what I've got, you won't just win custody. He paused. You'll burn the whole house down. It wasn't the reunion Lyra expected. She had faced warlords and war zones, but nothing quite prepared her for sitting across from Walter Sloan, the father of her ex-husband, in a dusty old garage outside of town. He didn't offer apologies, didn't ask about her daughter. He just said, I heard what they did. I'm not here to calm you down. I'm here to make sure you don't miss. Walter was a retired Green Beret Vietnam Panama Fallujah, the kind of man who didn't believe in therapy, but believed in honor. They hadn't spoken in 8 years. Not since her ex remarried, and Walter quietly cut ties with both his son and the woman he married. Now the grizzled old man pulled out a lockbox. You're going to want to see this. Inside, a sealed internal memo from the sheriff's office dated 3 years ago, dismissed. Body cam footage from a rookie cop who quit 6 weeks later. A signed deposition from a social worker who went missing the following spring. And one more thing. This Walter said handing her a flash drive is from someone inside, still active. Lyra's hands trembled. "Why do you have all this?" Walter looked up, his voice hard as gravel. "Because I've been collecting it. I didn't know when it would matter, but I knew one day someone would walk through hell and come out pissed off enough to use it." He leaned forward. "And Lyra, that someone is you." Then came the blueprint. Walter had mapped out a strategy not for revenge, but for exposure. You don't take down a machine by screaming. You take it down by pulling the right wires quietly. The 3 targets were the stepmother, the sheriff, and a judge with too many sealed cases and a mortgage that didn't make sense. This wasn't rage anymore. This was war with a purpose. Lyra didn't need comforting. She needed aim. And Walter, with all his scars and silence, handed it to her. In that moment, 2 generations of warriors sat across a workbench. Not as family, but as soldiers in a fight no one else dared start. The room wasn't as grand as Lyra expected. No wood-paneled drama, no judge hammering a gavel, just 4 investigators, 1 U.S. attorney, and a digital recorder blinking red. But once she sat down, the atmosphere shifted. Lyra took a deep breath, looked up and began, "This isn't about custody anymore. This is about cover-ups, corruption, and a child nearly dying under state protection." She spoke for 47 minutes, detailing every bruise, naming every officer who ignored her reports, handing over copies of the sealed audio files courtesy of the nurse. Citing the documents Walter gave her, each marked confidential. By the 10th minute, the federal agent closest to her had stopped taking notes and started recording her every word on his phone off the record, but for backup. By the 30th minute, the U.S. attorney asked to pause so they could call in a second team. By the 47th minute, no one in that room was breathing normally. "You're not just filing a complaint," one of them said quietly. "You just triggered something big." Lyra didn't flinch. "Good. Because if you stay quiet after today, then you're part of the system I'm tearing down." This wasn't testimony. It was ignition. She had entered that building as a grieving mother. She walked out as a federal witness under seal, with marshals tailing her to a secured hotel room. A judge hadn't slammed a gavel, but the first domino had fallen. It started at 2:14 a.m., a message, then another, then a string of calls. "Call me, please, it's not what you think. Let's talk before this gets worse." Lyra didn't answer. She just stared at the screen, her phone lighting up like a fire alarm. It was him, her ex-husband, then his wife, then a blocked number, almost definitely the sheriff. By morning, there were 19 missed calls, 7 voicemails, and 3 cryptic texts from someone who hadn't spoken to her in 5 years. "Whatever you're planning, stop. You don't know how deep this goes." She sipped her coffee, slowly, eyes cold. "They're unraveling," she muttered. "Good." She opened her laptop, uploaded the first redacted file to the journalist's encrypted inbox, and typed only one sentence: "This is just the beginning." The powerful were panicking, and Lyra wasn't hiding anymore. She let their messages sit there, unread, unanswered, like ghosts piling up in her inbox. She didn't need to yell. She had proof. She had allies. She had momentum. It happened at 5:47 a.m. No dramatic entrance, no helicopter circling overhead. Just 3 unmarked cars pulling up quietly in front of the sheriff's house. The neighbors didn't even notice. The press wasn't tipped off. The local cops were not informed intentionally, because this arrest wasn't for show. It was for surgical precision. The federal agents walked up the driveway in formation, knocked twice. The door opened. Inside stood the man who had once told Lyra to drop it for the good of the town. He didn't say a word. He just looked at the cuffs like he'd never seen justice up close before. One agent read him his rights. Another retrieved his badge. A third retrieved a laptop. "You're under federal investigation for obstruction of justice, witness intimidation, and conspiracy to cover up child abuse." They didn't even raise their voices. But the ground shook anyway. The sheriff, the untouchable man, was now a suspect. And suddenly the town wasn't silent anymore. Phones rang. Whispers exploded in town halls and coffee shops. And in the hospital room, Lyra's lips curled into the smallest, most dangerous smile. This wasn't revenge. It was reckoning. The courtroom was silent. Not respectful silence. Not legal formality. It was dread. Cold. Thick. The tape was 26 seconds long. Just a nurse's recording made on instinct, hidden behind a clipboard. And when they played it, Shell live. But maybe now Shell learn her place. The woman's voice was calm, too calm. There was no panic, no remorse, only control, only power. The air shifted. Even the judge blinked differently. One juror covered their mouth. Another leaned forwards, eyes wide in horror. Lyra, she didn't blink. She had lived in war zones. She had heard worse. But this was the voice of evil in pearls and perfume. Within 6 hours, the tape had leaked. First to the journalist, then to Twitter, then to every parent on earth. Chad's Justice for Amelia began trending. Celebrities reposted it. Military wives rallied. Survivors of abuse stood up. What she said wasn't just cruel. It was an open confession. The court projector flickered to life. Slide after slide, document after document, wire transfers, bank receipts, cash withdrawals made minutes after court decisions, memos misplaced, emails mysteriously deleted, all tied to one name, Sheriff Holden. But Lyra didn't look at him. She looked straight at his sister, the stepmother. Her lip twitched for the first time. Among the exhibits, a bribe to a social worker labeled donation, $20,000, wired to a judge's campaign fund one day after ruling against Lyra's custody, deleted surveillance footage invoices from the hospital IT vendor. One by one, every silent accomplice had their price printed, circled, and presented. The silence wasn't accidental. It was systemic. When the prosecutor dropped Exhibit D, the room didn't gasp, it clenched. Because justice wasn't just coming, it was sharpened and personal. And for the first time, the system that once silenced Lyra was forced to listen. The courtroom was full press protesters and people who had prayed for this day. But as the judge read the verdict, it was silence that fell like thunder. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. On all counts, no gasp, no applause, only breath held and finally exhaled. A system that finally spoke truth. The sheriff guilty of conspiracy, obstruction of justice. The stepmother guilty of felony child abuse. The judge suspended under federal investigation. The social worker and hospital staff indicted for willful neglect. Every link in the chain cracked, and for once the chain didn't tighten, it broke. Lyra walks out. No smile, no tears, just a long breath and the sound of her boots on marble. She didn't turn to look back. Justice doesn't ask for applause. It asks for courage. And Lyra had given it everything. The audience isn't cheering, they're gripping their chairs. Because this isn't courtroom drama. It's a war of truth, and the verdict is the final bullet. Justice was served, but the taste was never meant to be sweet. The hospital room was dim. Machines hummed their slow, steady rhythm. Outside, the storm had passed, but inside Lyra's chest, the thunder still echoed. She had slept in that chair for 5 nights. Every shift change, every beep, every breath. And then a whisper broke the silence. "Mom, you kept your promise." Lyra's eyes snapped open. Her daughter's eyes were half-lidded but awake. Alive, present. Her voice was weak, but her words carried the weight of survival. Lyra didn't cry. Not at first. She just placed her forehead gently on her daughter's hand and whispered back, "I always will." The headlines were everywhere. Sheriff removed in abuse, cover-up father of victim, sentenced to 14 years. Whistleblower nurse praised for heroism. The media camped outside her hospital. Cameras waited for her tears. Microphones thirsted for a quote. But Lyra never came to the podium. She didn't raise her fist. She didn't smile for the cameras. She didn't take the calls. Because the only place she wanted to be was curled beside her daughter, reading the same bedtime story they had once abandoned before a war began. Truth had rippled. But Lyra didn't ride the waves. She went home to the only victory that mattered. No press conference, no champagne, no "we did it." Just a quiet Tuesday morning. Lyra stood in the kitchen. The kettle whistled. Sunlight poured through the window like a silent blessing. And behind her, tiny footsteps. "Mom!" a voice whispered. She turned. Her daughter stood there, hair a mess, teddy in hand, eyes wide with sleep and safety. Lyra dropped to her knees, wrapped her arms around that fragile body once more. No words, just breath. In, out, together. Because this was never about punishment, never about headlines, never about revenge. It was always about making the world safe enough for one little girl to sleep without fear. And that world now lived inside their home. If this story moved you, if it made you think about justice, about silence, about love that fights back, then don't let it end here. Subscribe to the channel. We tell stories that the world tries to bury. Real voices, raw truths, no sugarcoating, because someone out there needs to hear you're not alone. And you can fight back too. Hit the bell and join us on the next battle for truth. If this story hit you in the chest, if it made you think about justice, love, and the danger of silence, then don't stop here. Subscribe to the channel. We tell the stories the world tries to bury. The raw truths, the voices no one wanted to hear. Because somewhere out there, someone needs to hear one thing. You're not alone. And yes, you can fight back. Hit the bell and walk with us as we uncover what was meant to stay hidden.